that was a consequence, of course, of 9/11 and passing a bill that they had tried to pass for a long time, but they got it passed right after 9/11. And that was the Patriot Act that should have never been passed. It should be repealed. I claim that the Patriot Act would have never been passed if they called it Repeal the Fourth Amendment Act. Maybe they would have voted against it. So when we get ready to repeal it, we're not going to say it's the repeal of the Patriot Act because people like to be patriotic. I think it's an unpatriotic act. But what we should call the bill is Restore the Fourth Amendment Act. Of course, it's this attitude that allows, the type of treatment that we all get at airports. We don't need the TSA pretending they're making us safer. We're not safer because the TSA undermines our personal liberty, violates our personal property and our persons themselves. And they say this is done all to make us safe and secure. I think it's a dream. I think it's misled, and unfortunately, it just teaches us to once again be obedient to the state. Just as the income tax is obedience to the state, the TSA makes us obedient and march in line and do as they call. Of course, there's another effort that really tells you about who owns our lives, and it's on the books. It's not being used now, unfortunately, but I was on the receiving end of this, and that is the military draft. The military draft says that you can be enslaved to fight a war even if it's unconstitutional and declared, whether it was the Korean War or Vietnam War or whatever. It's still on the books. Young people have to register, and I think if we truly had a republic and we truly cherished our liberties, we would all fight to defend our country, and we wouldn't need to have a draft ever. The American people are waking up. Washington is still sound asleep. And it is not only Washington, D.C. that we have to be concerned about. There's a lot of levels of government. This is pervasive. It creeps along. The policing activity of the federal government creeps into the lower levels too. But on January 1st, when a lot of new laws come into effect, this year, in spite of this anti-government movement, the Tea Party movement and others saying enough is enough, let's back off, people are waking up, but we still have a lot of work to do. This January 1st, 40,000 new laws were placed on the books. What I'd like to see today is when we remove 40,000 laws. Of course, under those circumstances, we would shrink the Federal Register. But the way the laws are written are incorrect. Only the Congress is supposed to write the laws, not the executive branch. But we create an agency, and then the agencies go wild, and they massively expand the power of these agencies, and they write the regulations, and they become law. And the president sometimes will say, well, the Congress is not acting quickly enough, so I will just write an executive order. And presidents have been doing this. Those are illegal. A president, a constitutional president, should use the executive order to repeal all those bad executive orders and all those laws that we're not legally. Of course, we have a judicial system that does the same thing. They do a lot of writing of laws. But the Patriot Act is an onerous bill. But what about this whole notion that the president can assassinate an American citizen? That's what he says is the law of the land, just by an announcement. And he did it 3 times. Matter of fact, more than that has been known. But it was announced. Before in the past, they at least kept it secret, pretending that they didn't have it. Now they put it out on the table in a Senate hearing. Yeah, that is the position of the executive branch today, that they can. And not only that, when the National Defense Authorization Act got passed at the beginning of this year, this was put on a platter by the Congress and said the president can use the military now to arrest civilian Americans and put in prison, and denied an attorney, denied a trial, denied charges, kept in a secret prison indefinitely. That's law of the land. And they said, well, that isn't hasn't been used too much. But it's that principle that sits there. What if we get into an economic calamity like some of us believe we might if we don't straighten out our budget and we have chaos? If they rounded up the Japanese in World War II, they're quite capable of rounding up American citizens. If this authoritarianism that prevails, and people tend to, I can understand the desire, because when there is chaos and it looks like anarchy, people say, please, please give us more power, more government, more government. So to me, as a physician in particular, I think an ounce of prevention, is much more better than a pound of cure. So we need to prevent this from happening. So we have our work cut out for ourselves, but fortunately today, we're in better shape philosophically than we have been in a long, long time. I've been talking and reading and studying and trying to understand economics and foreign policy and personal liberties, and I got interested even in the early 60s and had trouble finding information. Today it's easy to find information. You have the internet. Even if the government has already started, and the government has already started to try to close down and control the internet, that is one thing that we have to keep our eyes and keep up the vigilance to make sure they don't take over the internet. And you and the people deserve a lot of credit for stopping this bill, Stop Online Piracy Act. This was done by the people complaining to their congressman, and the congressman started taking their names off that bill, and both the House and the Senate removed it, which means that if we send the message to Washington, even those who don't have strong convictions, they'll get their convictions from us because they always want re-elected, and send them a message on what they ought to be doing is what they need to do. It's frequently been said, we talk about liberals and conservatives and independents and all, but, there was an old saying, and I think it was especially in the 60s, they said if you were 20 years old and not a liberal, you didn't have a heart. I imagine you've heard that. But then they said if you were 40 and you weren't a conservative, you didn't have a brain. And that was the way people were supposed to change. The freedom movement says, why can't we have a heart and why can't we have a brain at the same time? And this is why for all our problems, whether it's the monetary problem, whether it's the economic problems of overspending, whether it's the attack on our civil liberties, whether it's these ridiculous wars that we're constantly fighting, the answer comes in the principle of individual liberty, which is what Jefferson starts off with, in the Declaration, an inalienable right to our life and our liberties, and they come not from our government, but from a creator or in a natural way. And but we messed that concept up as well 100 years ago because it became divided. Some people thought, well, economic liberty was separate from personal civil liberties and personal lifestyle. So you have one half defending half of liberty, the other half on the other side, and they fight and feud. And so often these two sides get together and they expand the size of government, for different reasons. One side wants to spend money on domestic, the other one's on the foreign wars. They get together and spend them on both. That has to be reversed. Freedom should bring people together. It should never be divisive if you understand what freedom is all about. And we generally understand this on religious values. We know that we're supposed to protect freedom of religion. Sometimes it's still getting abusive, and sometimes the attacks today, it doesn't make me comfortable. But we generally say, yes, practice your religion, whatever you want to be. If you want to be anything, you don't want to believe, the government's not supposed to be involved. But when it comes to personal liberties, lifestyles, and what we put into our bodies, all of a sudden we have a bunch of busybodies telling us exactly what we're supposed to do with our lives and how we should run our lives. But I think the principle there is that we should never accept the idea that the government can protect us against ourselves. It's our business on what we do. But we have both economic and personal liberty. The one thing, though, is tough for some people is that you have to be tolerant of other people, how they use it, whether it's their religious or their personal lifestyle, as long as if they mess up, they can't come to you and say, well, bail me out because I messed up. They can't do that. But the tolerance part is difficult for some because some people do use their personal liberties and it's rather abhorrent. But if they don't hurt anybody else, and it's just because they want to live that way, that should be their business. Now you say, well, that doesn't work. We have to have government stepping in. We have to have them stepping in economically because there's always a need. We have to step in because personal habits can get out of control. Well, yes, there's one rule that you can. They step in when people commit fraud or abuse or theft or injure people or steal or hurt people. Yes, that's when the government steps in. But no otherwise. But there's reason to be optimistic because of the number of people joining. You say, well, why aren't you winning all these states then if you're so optimistic? Well, I'll tell you what, changing 100 years of history takes a little bit of time. But it is growing by leaps and bounds, and it's not about me or what I do because it's not my message. It's a message of what was given to us and what the founders gave us, what's in the Constitution. And I avoid using the terms, let's go back to the 19th century, let's go back to the gold standard, let's go back to the original intent of the Constitution in its all-inclusive, because there were flaws. There were. And you can do better on the gold standard. We certainly can do better when it comes with race relations and all these other things right now. We still have trouble with race relations when you deal with the enforcement of the drug laws. So we can move forward, but we pick up the good parts and move forward. And I think the people are coming together now. Not only are the people who have been paying these bills are sick and tired of it because they're down to about 49% paying for the 51%, but the people on the receiving end are getting pretty worried too because they know our country's getting poorer. This $1.5 trillion debt every year, $15 trillion national debt, owing foreigners $3 trillion, owing the Chinese money, these endless wars. American people know something has to change. It just can't continue. They will not always honor our dollar. Right now, we're getting away with too much. We print money and the world still takes it. But they're still expecting us to bail out the world. They're expecting us to bail out Europe. And if at the rate we're going, if the dollar holds up, you and I will be owning Greek debt. But there'll be a limit. Common sense tells you there'll be a limit. We don't know when that limit will hit, but it could hit next month, in a year, or 2 or 3. So my suggestion is be informed, get involved, participate. You have a job. The immediate job we have right now is to show this country that the state of Washington is behind the cause of liberty. And I thank you all.
Dr. Paul, if you really have questions, we have a Q&A that's going to follow.